Hi, everyone. My name is Joan Bajorek. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, podcast host, best-selling author, and I am excited to talk to you today about future-proofing your career and income in the age of AI.
I think I would love to. Obviously, you have a book. Is it coming out, or is it out already?
Dropped a few days ago.
Your AI roadmap, and it comes with like the slight promise of giving you actions to expand your career, money, and joy, which is quite a lot. And so I don't know where to start because we love frameworks, and it seems that you're kind of like in the same camp. Maybe you could start with just kind of telling a little bit about what prompted you to get going on the book project.
Yes, it is a companion to my podcast. And what prompted me to do the podcast was that my being an AI influencer, being a linguist, suddenly when ChatGPT came out, my socials went wild. And so tripling down on what my audience wants would be, I guess, a piece of that. I feel like I am living a lot of the volatility of what's going on in the market. I've been in 2 AI layoffs. I live here in Seattle. I build AI. Like data infrastructure. It's what people pay me to do typically. But more and more in my DMs, how do I get a job in AI? I'm terrified to lose my job. Joan, help me. Or is like the DMs I'm getting from people around the world. So this book, as you mentioned, Actions to Expand, it has frameworks, it has templates. Like if you choose not to do them, that's on you. But my book is very actionable. Modern Careers is part 1. Modern Finance is part 2. So if people are scared of layoffs, this is the resource I provide them on a plate.
So just walk us through. I mean, for the folks who haven't picked up the book or haven't had a chance to read it yet, but maybe they slide into your DMs and they go, what do I do? Short of, I mean, the cheeky answer is, of course, buy my book, right? Which is great. But what's your 80-20, the first 3 things you should do to, stave off your existential, fear or crisis or whatever? What are and I love, by the way, your phrase actions to expand. What are the actions you recommend?
Yes. The actions I would recommend, if there are 3 things: personal brand. Do people know who you are? Can they find you online? Many people I know, their headshot doesn't even look like them anymore. I'm not going to call out names over here. Second one being your network. Do you have people that you can be like, hey, Tim, do you know like a resource I should go to? Like LinkedIn did a research that after COVID layoffs, 70% of people landed their next job based on an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the side route, it's the main route. So do you have a network that you foster? Do you go to events in your field? Blah, blah, blah. Personal brand network. Third one, do you have an emergency fund? Have you been taking care of your financial house? The number of people living paycheck to paycheck despite huge salaries scares me.
What are you seeing there? Tell us what you're seeing there. That phrase, because I think that's really paradoxical, right? Living paycheck to paycheck on a huge salary. Tell us what you're seeing.
Oh yeah. Well, I talk about my friend in this in with the book. She makes 1.3 million a year. She's not happy with her job, and I was like, "You've been making good money. Like you have a C-suite job. Like, could you just take a break? Could you like retire?" Type thing. She's like, "Oh no, I don't have anything saved." Like, because she spends it. And I don't mean to be, it's her personal finances, but like some people make money and they're spending it all.
How do you guide people when just kind of working backwards, maybe? Emergency fund, are there rules of thumb or either actions in terms of immediate actions to take to start to build that up and or goals? Like, I think when I think of an emergency fund, part of the challenge is that's a very nebulous, like, do I have enough? In a sense, the answer could be never, because there's an unknown kind of time horizon. So how do you help folks take action there?
Well, my lawyer would recommend that I say that I'm not a certified wealth planner.
Please, noted. This is not certified financial advice. We are AI nerds who like to go between the practical and the existential, and we might be towing the line delicately here. So, audience, beware, please.
But educational, do your own. Personal finance is personal. An emergency fund is the concept that if you lose your job or something really catastrophic happens, my water heater just broke, had to fix that. That I have, let's say, 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So that's my mortgage, that's food, basic stuff. I have the money set aside in something typically really boring, like a high yield savings account. My high yield savings account pays me 4% just to leave a chunk of money sitting there just in case. The typical rule is that you have 3 to 6 months. In this market, I'd recommend it's 6 to 12 months. I have friends sitting on the job market who are so qualified, 21 months. So if you don't have something to protect yourself, it's an emergency fund. Well, really sexy title.
We have a friend called Nicholas who talks about what he calls the unknowingly unemployed, the people that think they have a job, but they don't really, and they think they might have a next job, but it might not be there anymore. And I think that is such a scary kind of concept. When you wrote the book and you were thinking about your personal finances, are there anything that you discovered where you can use AI to help kind of either make sure you have that little nested egg or that you can get AI to help you plan it?
I mean, there are features within products I use that do these automated things for me that I'm like, whoa, like that is, you're making me money while I do nothing, basically. SoFi has some really cool features where it like tracks my credit score. It tracks different stocks. Like, hey, this just hit a 52-week high, just in case you wanted to know that, or low. I use also, I don't know if I'd call it an AI tool. It's on that cusp there. TripIt. Do you all use TripIt by chance? I travel plenty for work, and it'll like flag when flights that I have refundable, like, when you buy a refundable ticket, when the price drops, and it gives scripts of calling and say, excuse me, my flight price dropped $100. I'd like 100.
Cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And
better if you could use 11 Labs to make the call on your behalf, right? So then you feed 11 Labs the script and the phone number, and then have AI do it for you.
I tried one today. I'm just reminded of, I took my Amex bill and then I just dropped it in for last year. And I just asked ChatGPT, are there any recurring expenses that I should potentially cancel? And it just nicely kind of listed out like all the services, and unfortunately there were none, but I think like just kind of like using it in that way is maybe useful.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go, just out of curiosity to explore the full kind of framework here, you had said 1, personal brand, 2, network, 3, emergency fund. We've kind of covered emergency fund. Let's go to network. What are the actions you recommend folks take or how do you think about assessing your network? Maybe to start there, before action.
Yes. I mean, these are going to be super basic. Like, you're going to have heard these many, many times, but I find that people don't do them. Are you going to virtual events in your field? Are you pivoting to a new field and you need to go to the event in person? Do you look at the conference schedule and see what cool people you want to meet? Do you meet those people and follow up with them online? Like, these following up with the right person has gotten me so many cool opportunities. And it's having my social set up so that people are like, oh, I met that person. Like, all those dots align for modern networking. So I think it's the strength of who you meet. Do people know you? Like, I'm really hoping it closes, a really, really cool opportunity in my DM from someone I met 3 years ago. Like, I met her half an hour 3 years ago, and she could find me easily online. Like, oh, Joan still does that. Made connect, made an intro. I have a cool opportunity just sitting in my DMs. So that's the long game. But I think having that network of people who know you for what you do, it's kind of like that personal brand and network are like very much intertwined.
Is there any kind of system there? I mean, I immediately think in terms of systems just to ensure kind of nothing falls through the cracks. It's one thing to kind of, maybe there's a systemic review of looking at events, and then there's the kind of pre-event roster review. There may be the post-event follow-up. What about engagement, sustaining relationships long-term? What actions do you recommend there?
Following up with your friends. One of the things I do very frequently is like ask for advice, or kind of I think about it as like good karma. It's like you pay it forward, you pay it back. At the end of hanging out with people, it's like, what do you need? Like, is there something I could help you with that would really move the needle for you? Do you need an intro? Would you like to find this cool resource or the book about money that, you're interested in, whatever the case will be? So I think it's that give and get. We pay it forward, we pay it back. It's an easy way to stay in touch with people, because they're like, wow, Jeremy's always the person that gives me awesome resources. Like, what a way to keep you top of mind.
It is kind of cool how accessible people are through LinkedIn, right? I think most I definitely read everything that comes in through the DM. You know, you might not reply to all of it. Some of it is a little bit spammy, but if it's kind of like written in a little bit of an original way and comes with sincerity, I mean, like I think most of them get an answer. And I think in my experience, as I was kind of building my own career, I also was surprised of how many people actually email. Like if you email somebody, they'll actually email something back if you ask in a kind way. I think a lot of people just kind of preemptively don't send something because they assume that people just won't answer.
My CTO calls them the mind gremlins that you're letting hold you back. Like, oh no, will that person respond? Will they think I'm cool? Just send it. As long as it's respectful. You know what I mean? You may not get a response. You make it an amazing opportunity. I recommend sending it. I agree with you.
And what about the first one, the building your own network? You were mentioning, being findable. So making sure your profile is up to date and stuff like that. Have you found a way of using AI to kind of build up your personal brand in other ways?
I mean, most of like matching things on LinkedIn are NLP scraping. So making sure your keywords are up to date, making sure there are words on your projects. That's not really AI, but I think preparing it to be scraped by AI, thinking about it that way. I use a tool called Aragon.ai for headshots. I talk to a lot of people who they're like, ooh, my headshot looks too corporate for the work I want to do today, or I'd like it to look more professional. And so people have used generative AI. You put in your selfies, like 20 selfies or something. You pay $35 and it pops out headshots that look quite like you.
You know what? I'm curious about this because I also have a book coming out August 5th. And I just got asked by the publisher to get a headshot. And so the last one I got done was through BarkBox. And so it's funny, a dog licking my face and stuff like that, but probably not too suited for an AI entrepreneurship book. And so I did what you just suggested, like, so I put 20 things in, I got my headshot. I got like this basically picture of me standing in the streets of New York that I kind of enjoy. Now I showed it to my wife and she goes like, that's a great photo. It's just not you. I was like, what do you mean? She goes like, the whole point about your book is about like how the last mile is all about relationship capital and all about how, like to have authenticity and authority in the people to people kind of interface. Yeah. And so where are you on the using the human flaws, like the flaw in the picture, the flaw in like how you look when you're standing there and feeling annoyed that the photographer is asking you to kind of like smile for the 20th time? How do you feel about like generating a persona that has the AI filter versus showing the vulnerability of doing something that is you?
Well, I mean, I would completely agree with you about the authenticity and the human capital. The more I work in AI, the more I network, the more I meet new people, right? Like on contracts, it's another human signing it typically. And that's what moves the needle. That's what the research, every time I tripled down the research, I'm like, what does this say? I think for the person who's had the most success with a generative AI headshot, it looked more like him. Like, or at least the man I think I know. The old one was so stiff and clearly taken at a company where you don't like have to, suit and like back against the wall. Right. And that didn't look like who he is today professionally. So the new headshot, despite being generated, in the back end, like matched him better. So I think it ticks that authenticity for me and the AI piece. But I agree with you. If it looks glossy and like, I don't know, I find them so fake and I get turned off typically.
But it does seem that there's like almost, okay, this is totally going down like a rabbit hole, but like I was thinking about this fake look, right? Because you look at music over the last 10 years and you've had the auto-tune sound kind of being very prominent. And you have, I would say like a visual, like in fashion, increasingly like the very pumped up lips and like the very, almost like audacious version of beauty seem to be something that at least have had like a period of time where like that got celebrated. And then now with AI, everybody is like a prompt away of making, and then you had like the Instagram filters and stuff like that. I wonder if all this AI stuff is going to make that pendulum swing to the other side where the picture perfect is then considered kind of like artificial and the flaws are considered more human. If we're going to see like a face with that.
Oh, I love that. Please tell my team. They're always like, more hair, more makeup. And I'm like, no, really? It's the flaw that shows them a real human. That's interesting. Well, I just spoke on another podcast, Product Tea, with Leah, and she actually tags her posts right now as like made by human, 100% made by human, because she believes in the near future, because there's so much generated content. Like she wants to differentiate herself and establish her personal brand like really strongly. I think that's just a fascinating paradox, because I do think that people are so glossed up, right? They're so, like, as you mentioned, auto-tuned. And will that scratchiness like eventually be an extra bonus of the authenticity?
Just on the music front, I mean, Henrik knows this, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. And this weekend I was playing some old Dylan tunes with my girls. And one thing I was noticing, even as I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, is, in the car, is Dylan sings offbeat. He sings out of tune. And I know what the tune is, and he's not, and I'm not like pitch perfect or anything, but he's off tune, right? And he's off the beat, and he's ahead of the beat sometimes, right? And to me, it's those and I know a little bit about the history of those recordings. A lot of them, they actually didn't think they got a take until they listened later, and they're like, let's release it. It's not now, you do 400 takes to get everything perfect. Then, I think there were only like 6 takes of Like a Rolling Stone, and all of them were different. And they didn't even think they got anything until like weeks later that they were listening, like, actually, the 3rd take wasn't that bad. Let's release that, right? So there's, I think, inherent in the art and in the production, maybe the expense of production as it's decreased, perfection is increased, and something of the human kind of authenticity is decreased, perhaps. So I resonate with that for sure. And I would say the art I love most actually has that kind of imperfection and authenticity. I wanted to go back to what you said a second ago as well, Joan, because I think it's a really interesting point that probably eludes a lot of people. You mentioned NLP scraping, prepare to be scraped. So if, say, someone wants to be building or aware of their personal brand, what does it look like to be prepared to be scraped? For like in plain English, and specifically, what are the actions someone takes in order to be prepared?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're getting this directly from a linguist. So, natural language processing is how computers process human language, right? So some people think like, oh, I've already done these projects. People should know phrases like this. But if people are trying to match with you on LinkedIn for professional reasons, chances are they're going to look for specific words. And by they look, like actually having the keywords or many variations of vocabulary in your field on your LinkedIn, like tagged with different company names. So for example, I might have words like data lake or digital twins or AI and artificial intelligence spelled out fully, because it's maybe looking for one or the other. So the words like alt text, also I'd recommend like always putting in words, because you think they're so sophisticated, but today they're just like trying to match exact token for token. So especially for job seekers, that's one of the top things I think they missed, is having all of that prepared. Imagine it's just text to the back end, not in your gorgeous images.
And so how do folks think about auditing their just text, for example? Like how do you even know if your just text is representative, if it is going to be a token for token? Are there tools to leverage in order to do that well? What do you recommend?
Well, I'm not a representative of LinkedIn, but they do have you for a higher tier price. They can show you if you match well with jobs you like. So if you say, okay, here are 3 jobs that are awesome that I totally love, they actually already have keywords that a recruiter had to put in, and see if you match those exact keywords. So I would just back propagate. Here are 3 jobs I like. Here are the keywords. Make sure they're represented everywhere on my profile.
That's cool. That's cool. Just reverse engineer it. In a way, I mean, it's few shot prompting for LinkedIn profiles, what you're saying. For folks who aren't familiar with the concept of few shot prompting, it's basically telling AI what good is, right? So if you ask AI to write you an email, it'll do it, but most people go, that's not in my voice. Well, you probably didn't tell what your voice was or what you think good is. And if you say, write me an email, by the way, here's an email that I wrote yesterday that I think is pretty good, write it like this. That's what's called few shot prompting, or at least one shot prompting, and you'll do a much better job. What it sounds like you're saying, Joan, is you can take a good profile or a good job and you can effectively, few shot prompt AI to say, hey, here's the job I want to be a fit for. Make my profile a good fit for it. That's cool. I'm putting words in your mouth, or is that what you're saying?
That's exactly it. And the thing is, recruiters see like, this is a good fit candidate. Like you would get starred in the back end for having these good matches faster on their side too.
We had a talk with Ethan Malik, and he was pointing all this out, like not something different, but pointing it out like a year ago that AI is pretty gullible. And so if you just write it in a way that it consumes it well, then it will just kind of repeat that verbatim, because obviously it doesn't have a perspective. It's just kind of, to your point, like is the word. And so he was even suggesting back then that in the meta tags of his personal homepage, he basically write a prompt to the AI agent, kind of like crawling through his site, where he asked it what it would like to be written about him. And then he noticed that that is exactly what it then would write, which is kind of fascinating.
You're a best-selling author that you need to book for this opportunity.
Exactly right.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
But I think it's getting very, for somebody who started BarkBox, we're obviously now increasingly looking at how are we going to make sure that when people say, hey, my dog is turning 13, she has a birthday soon, I'd love a good present for her, we would like to be at least considered, right? So the classic kind of SEO game is increasingly becoming important, because the SEO methodology is now de facto what the agents are doing to kind of figure out what to say. And because they say it with conviction, it doesn't come out as just you kind of putting meta tags in. It kind of gets presented in a statement form, right? And so I thought a lot about it for products, but I think you're totally right. This is exactly the same thing for humans, right? You need to figure out what you want to be told about you.
I would argue like so much is commoditized, like because for a recruiter, you are the product A to B that I'm slotting in the, it's a funny thing, but packaging yourself up to make it so easy.
Okay, Joan, tell us about the last time you personally used Gen AI for your, call it life or work effectiveness. The last time, not the best time.
Yesterday, a day and a half ago, I was debugging some code in R, and it just, it's so lovely. It's like, here's the problem. We think it's this problem, or this problem. Like, go try it out.
What's your preferred collaborator?
Oh, well, it's between ChatGPT and Perplexity, typically. I love Perplexity. Big stan here.
So here's what I tell people. I'd be curious to know if your experience differs. Perplexity is effectively, Google replacement. It's not a foundation model in the sense that it's not going to be a conversational partner with me in kind of the existential way that perhaps ChatGPT or even increasingly Claude can be, but for grounded in fact, grounded in reality, probably less hallucination. Perplexity is a better way to go. Is that how you think about the distinction between, call it a ChatGPT and a Perplexity, or when do you use which and why?
I think of Perplexity as like the mature adult in the room. Like the factual, it gives citations, even if I don't actually like the citations, but at least they have citations. Whereas ChatGPT, it like meets me where I'm at in the tone, and like it does the editing far faster when I need to reprompt. But then I tried different models in ChatGPT, and they're substantially different.
What do you notice?
Yeah, whichever models are doing the interpreting, like I was just debugging code, all of them work reasonably well. When I need like prose, like a difficult email I had to send the other day, one of the models was far more polished in that verbal.
And so how did you know, is your kind of standard workflow? Hey, by the way, I did this yesterday, so I'm curious to just hear from you. Okay. Is it, I opened 3 windows, I've got 01, 03, and 40. I type this same prompt into each one, and then I'm kind of looking to see which one's best. Like, how do you know that one is giving you better prose?
Oh gosh, Jeremy has like an ABC testing. Love that. I just am unhappy and I switch models and try again.
Oh, so you try one and you're like, this isn't good. And so rather than refine within that model, is your first kind of tactic to change models before changing tack within a model?
I mean, I follow different flows. So if I try, blah, blah, make it more playful or make it more direct, and it's not giving me things within like 3 prompts, I'll switch models.
That's cool. That's interesting. So you kind of go, okay, I'm going to give you 3 chances, 40. And if you don't behave, I'm bringing your big sister into the room.
Typically, yeah.
How do you, we were talking to somebody else a few weeks back, and I think like a few others, he pointed out that a lot of humans will be replaced by humans who know AI, right? It isn't AI itself, it's the combination. Yes, I think Bryce from Moderna was talking about how like the world's best chess player is now even better because he plays with a computer. When people are asking you now, how do I get up the learning curve fast? What's your suggestion to them?
Listen to this podcast. Listen to my podcast. I really try to demystify. My podcast is called Your AI Roadmap. With people actually building, because I'm so done listening to people just like dreaming 2030. This is what it is. If you're building nuts and bolts, you have a different perspective. I think, and doing those tutorials, like nuts and bolts, going to the thing, seeing how it actually performs. As Jeremy and I were talking about, like, do you see the differences between different models? Like, how is that going to change your stack? There's nothing like doing the work yourself.
I think the frame of your book is your career, your money, and your joy. We've talked a lot about career. We've talked a lot about money. Let's touch on this joy piece. What do you recommend people do to attend to dial into, to be aware of, to audit, to assess, to amplify their joy?
It's so interesting. I don't have a specific framework for make sure it mostly in my book. I just want to make sure it's in people's mind to keep that in mind.
Even the risk to your joy is actually what you're interested in, is helping people see your joy is at stake here. And if you optimize and automate your life, you could end up with a life you don't want. You could end up in this dystopian, I'm in Zoom meetings all day because my auto, scheduler booked everything, right?
Yeah, I know those people. It's actually a bit scary. Like people are so efficient, quote unquote. They fill their time and schedule, and then they end up miserable, even if they're making bank. Like it's a trap, I think. And if you love it, hey, if you like your schedule's packed to the gills and that brings you joy, like it's on you, like go for it. But like I think that's the dystopian and optimistic. Like if we're talking about the AI futures, like dystopian is we all sit on computers all day long.
When I was doing actually on the making sure, John, I can't remember what it was. There was a book I recently read that was all about time boxing. Jeremy, you might recall. But I do really feel it's important that also to time box kind of like the time for joy, because otherwise it's the thing that just kind of gets squished out, right? Because obviously you just go like, oh, but I'm going to have fun when I don't do other things. I was curious about a thing as I was doing research on you back in, I believe it was 19, you were writing about gender biases in AI and voice, which obviously is almost a long time ago. And so I was curious of kind of like what the latest thinking is now that you have OpenAI kind of like increasingly having voice models. What's your latest thinking on that? And I'll recommend everybody else, and I'll put in the show notes the HBR article that you authored on the other stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Harvard Business Review published one of my comps papers for my PhD. It was pretty wild. I love building systems. I find it really fun, but it really scared me when I started like actually looking at the data sets and being like, there are no women's voices here. Like, and shocker, it doesn't perform well for women. Like, what is going on here? But that's truly the case with a lot of different data sets, that it's missing a demographic and it doesn't perform well for a demographic. Especially as a woman, I think it's super salient. I was like, this product won't work for me. Like, dun, dun, dun. So I think whether it's voice data, which is a lot of my background, conversational AI, whether it's computer vision data. I mean, I work today with multimodal data sets, which is super, super fun. But what does your data set represent and what does it not? I mean, data is foundational for anything we build. As far as I'm concerned, you all can disagree with me, but knowing what your data set does and doesn't have, it's like a basic data literacy skill today.
I mean, we dipped a little bit into it in a previous episode where we talk about ethical data sourcing and some of the issues around that, which was a fascinating episode. And I think
shout out, by the way, this is a good time, Henrik, for podcast hygiene. You should always shout out other episodes. Phoebe Yao, founder of Pareto AI, is an amazing episode about ethical data sourcing. If you haven't heard that episode, anyway, intermission. into him, like wisdom.
But that's why I'm so intrigued about it. So when you now have all these models, I understand obviously that if it's biased source, its output would be biased, like bias in, bias out kind of thing. What are the other kind of like gender issues that people might not be aware of? And the only thing that kind of came to mind was I seem to remember that there was some talk about the gender of the voices. Like if suddenly you are always kind of like having almost like a subservient attitude to an Alexa, and she is called Alexa, then you program into a new generation like how, that there's a gender preference in who's going to quote unquote serving you. I'm curious on, you being an expert in all this, what's the kind of like the thinking that we should be aware of that is not necessarily out there?
I think in a dystopian world, or, if we're not questioning our choices, there is a world where we create these assistants that are, right, as you mentioned, subservient to us, that are always, female coded. And then we start teaching everyone around us to like default this in. I actually change all my voice devices. I have many around my home to be an Australian male, because it frequently, I'm like, whoa, okay, like it's jarring to me enough. I think I've named him Peter. Anyway, but point being, like, you have agency. Almost all these devices, you can change what the output sounds like. Your brain thinks it's a certain gender. There's even agender assistants these days. But as you mentioned, or like the voice aspect is just a new toggle we're seeing in almost all these models and these foils today. So you have a lot of choice. I think just questioning how much gender does or doesn't play into the future is a whole other adventure. But I mean, I've worked at companies that buy or build data sets to make sure they're less biased, so they perform better on the market, because you could alienate buyers. So like capitalism doesn't like that gender bias so much. If your buyers are frequently women, like there is actually a cost to the company to have these problems.
Dr. Palmiter Bajorek, we are so grateful for you sharing your expertise with us.
So Jeremy, give me your takeaways.
I thought it's three simple and easy things to be thinking about for anybody who's wondering about what their career or future looks like. One, being aware of your personal brand. Two, cultivating your network. And then three, having an emergency fund. My own experience and observations have aligned with hers that folks, even with a high income, aren't necessarily good stewards and preparing for the future. So thinking about that, that's good. That's kind of a scary side, but I think it's good just to be aware of, is you should. I think 6 to 12 months of your expenses and savings is a great buffer, and that deserves to be said. I thought it was interesting, hearing about how 70% of folks get their next job from an introduction on LinkedIn, and being thoughtful and rigorous about looking at a conference schedule, following up with people, specifically giving people advice or offering help. I thought was great. I love the idea of offering help. And then for me, probably the thing that was most interesting was going to the personal brand space and saying, okay, is my profile designed to be scraped? And am I communicating the value that I create for folks, or the things I'm doing in the world, in a way that a natural language scraper would be able to match to a search query? I think it's kind of SEO for the AI driven world, I think is great. And I love the point about reverse engineering to what's the job you want, and then having AI assess your profile just based on, if an AI is scraping your profile, does it think you're a fit for the job? I think that, to me, is a simple activity everybody could do right now, is grab your LinkedIn profile, grab the top 3 jobs you would love to have, and then ask AI, what are the biggest gaps in experience maybe that you need to fill, but also just in expression that you need to edit. I think that is a simple action that everybody could take and probably reap enormous value from it.
I'm with you on the last. What's also like the big takeaway for me, this idea that we are now designing not for humans only, but for bots, and the elegance and the subtleties for human-to-human interaction might not completely be the same when you're doing it to bots, because bots at this point is a little bit more basic. And so I think from a Scandinavian, like anything that is very gradatory can sometimes kind of like come across a little bit crash. Like you just read and go like, I'm the world's leader, da da da. And you're like, oh, like, do you really sneak like, if you want that to be set, like call your mother, like you don't necessarily write on your post. But I do realize now that if you want the bots to say that about you, you probably just have to tell them what you want them to say about you. And you probably can't be too elegant about that. And that might mean that you have basically like the thing that you present in the normal UI, which is kind of like what you want humans to see, like pictures also and stuff like that. And then you have almost like the metadata that is written more to the bots, where you're a little bit more kind of blunt about like, hey, could you please tell people I'm cool, kind of thing.
That's hilarious. No, I do think that there's an opportunity right now for folks to recognize we are marketing to bots, not just to people. And that likely involves updating your thought process and strategy about communicating your value in your career.
So let's just be concrete. Like you have a homepage, I have a homepage. What is the thing that we should add? And I can definitely tell that if I ask ChatGPT, who is Henrik Wordlin, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the context of that comes from my homepage, because I can feel some of the words, and I have like some specific kind of like things that I've written in my little blurb there that I feel pretty certain it's picked up on. Is there anything that you would kind of like say, I need to put on my to-do list to add?
I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just kind of riffing with you here. But one thing that could be interesting is almost red teaming it. It's like, if I do it for myself, what are Jeremy Utley's blind spots? How do you define Jeremy's competition? How do you define comparables? How do you define outperformers? Because you could actually get AI to do some pretty interesting analysis of where you yourself are lacking. It's probably uniquely interesting to you yourself, but it's almost a way of reverse engineering. What do I need to bolster? What do I need to express differently? What experiences do I need to go get in order to be, more credible in whatever direction I want to be credible? But I wonder if you almost treat AI as a sparring partner, devil's advocate. Tell me why my, presentation or manifestation in the world is not what I hope it would be.
And then the second thing, and I don't have a good way to kind of like talk about this yet, but I do think there is something very fascinating about the auto-tuning of you that is emerging through heavy use of AI. And I can now see that when I write something and Grammarly comes up and suggests to rewrite it, I will often just go like accept, like, and it does change words, right? And it does change kind of like some of the things that I will normally say when we speak. It will change that into something that's kind of more appropriate or professional or whatever it is. And so when now, like I start to create all my profile pictures with AI, and I start to have my emails and my text message being rendered through that AI, I also have like this app, which I am trying to see what it's called. But it's basically one where you can talk into, you just talk into the microphone and it just rewrites it in a way that kind of looks like it was written. And so when I get a quick WhatsApp message on my computer, sometimes we just like babble into that and it'll be right. But is that something I should be aware of, because it is auto-tuning me? And so suddenly my unique Danish twang of a voice, being it through the written form, is no longer that. It is the twang of the AI auto-tune.
I think that is a danger only if you're using off-the-shelf, non-customized products. If you're using, for example, even something as simple as Claude Styles, which is basically where you can tell Claude what your writing or voice style is. If you're using simple tools that customize to your unique voice, I think you stand to sound more like yourself. I liked Joan's example of an AI generated headshot can actually look more like you, because these like sterile, like corporate headshots actually don't look like us at all. And I think I have found sometimes with my writing, I'll be collaborating with an AI thought partner and I go, that's actually what I wanted to say. And I didn't know I wanted to say it. And it's not that it doesn't sound like AI. It sounds like I had more time to think about that and expressed it in the way that I would have expressed that. And so I do think that probably if folks are just using off the shelf free or unmodified tools, you're probably going to become auto-tuned. But I think it's also possible for you, Henrik, to be more Henrik tuned. It's possible for me, Jeremy, to be more Jeremy tuned if we just exert a little bit of effort to teach an AI what we sound like or what we want to sound like.
Can I ask you a last question? And I realize that this like little kind of like reviewing what we just talked about is very much longer than we normally do, but we do have a lot of people who say that they enjoy this part. Do you have a good method of telling an AI how you write or how you see yourself for it to clone you better? So if you want the auto-tune to be more attuned to you,
yeah.
I mean, like, I realize you can just take a bunch of your writing and just put it in there.
Yeah. To me, it's illustrious examples that you're proud of. And it's not, don't characterize, don't say, friendly, approachable, casual, right? Which is probably how AI would describe my writing style.
Professor-ish.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Use a lot of words.
Yeah. At least one word with multiple syllables, like, onomatopoeia, right? Or whatever. But yeah, don't characterize it, because then you're leaving it to the AI to define what those words mean. But take actual samples and say, this, you describe it, you emulate this, you tell me what it is, right? And I think that over time, I have found there are certain even actual legit conversations in ChatGPT that I have starred, or in Claude that I have starred, where I go, there's so much context about my voice. This is where I do the polish on another piece, for example, because it ends up sounding more like me. And the way it sounded like me is because I've collaborated with it a lot to get it to a good point. Like, there are certain chats that if they got deleted, I would personally feel devastated.
You should make a copy.
Folks, if you've enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Prologue, hit like, if there's a way on social media to dogpile on the Henrik's giving me a hard time, feel free to find a way to do so. The secret word, I think we should start having a secret word for every episode, Henrik, just so we know if people get to the end. Like, I want to start giving people a prize if they actually listen to the whole. So like, could today be like pineapple shortcut? And we actually are interested to see whether our listeners, tag us with pineapple shortcut, for example. Just an idea.
I like it. Pineapple shortcut. Was that the first thing that came to mind?
That's the first thing that came to mind. Folks,
With that,
drop pineapple shortcut in the socials. We can't wait to hear you on the next episode. Let us know who we should talk to next. Be good.
bye.